three major cities which are not the major employment centers. It's unique. The problem in sort of trying to get a handle on South Florida is that we're sort of stuck in a political system that does not operate at the same scale as the ecological and economic systems that make up our environment. So the challenge is to sort of focus on this urban region, which may or may not have a name, certainly is not in any of our awareness, does not have an image. So I could ask you, what is South Florida? I would get lots of different images. And doesn't offer any sensory perception. I don't feel South Florida, I just sort of arrive. But there's no sort of sense of being there. There's no monument that I sort of say, I'm here. But these regions, these metropolitan regions, these urbanized regions, are in fact a fundamental block of economic and social organization in the planet. So we're actually starting to talk about, the collection of 400 or 500 cities worldwide, for which like 80% of the money and social programs and all this stuff goes through. We are one of those places. We don't think at that scale. And so the problem is, how do we do that? And this is a model of metropolitan prosperity, and I love that word for obvious reasons, done by the Brookings Institution. And what's important about this picture is not the graphics of the slides, but the word drivers, outcomes, and goal. So this really represents sort of a systems view. It says that there are processes that drive the ecological status, the economic status, the form status of our place. And then the outcomes are sort of what happens when we observe how the drivers are behaving. Now, what I'm going to argue is that planning is really about the drivers and not about the outcomes to achieve the goal. Okay? So if I'm going to say nothing else tonight, that's it. Planning is about the drivers. And it's about us driving too. So we are creating this thing called the South Florida School of Thought, and if the volume was really up, this would have been consistent with the burst. Would have been stuff there. The study of cities has gone through a progression from Athens and polis and democracy to the Renaissance, to the Industrial Revolution in Manchester, to social ecology in Chicago, to postmodern thought, and we don't know what the hell is going on anywhere, at the School of Los Angeles. And we're saying it's our time. Remember, how to do something special for South Florida. It's our time. And so we've sort of put South Florida on the top of this pyramid. We said that there is a school of thought, and we're working on it. Okay? Actually, did some reading about the Los Angeles School of Thought and how it started. It started over wine in a hill in Ojai, with a bunch of people who sort of were just drinking one night and sort of saying, let's create a school of thought. Okay, so this is it. We, in the past year, have created a new mission statement. It has several important features. One is it's a locus. And it's not just the faculty, it's everybody. It's committed to this notion of urban region. It's committed to sort of thinking about the things that drive the urban region as multi-scalar. It's committed to this notion of governance and not necessarily government. And we continue to want to exploit visualization and high-tech stuff. So, region, multi-scalar, systems thinking, drivers, outcomes, goals, and governance. Or more simply, this little triangle, this is sort of the new sustainability triangle. It's really not. It's better. So this is the region. This is actually night lights. It's a feature of sort of taking satellite images of where people are at night. So it's measuring where light bulbs are. And notice that that doesn't correspond to any county line or municipal line, it just is. And so I use the phrase urbanized region to indicate what is, not what some county or government bureaucracy is telling me what is. Okay? So that's what is. And the argument is that this is what needs to be planned. This is our daily life sphere. We move throughout this space for work, for entertainment, for 20th anniversary events. And so this is the scale at which we need to be thinking and planning and knowing about. This multi-scalar complexity stuff is really sort of a reemergence in my own mind and my colleagues' minds about systems theory, going back to Herbert Simon, and the notion that perhaps we will never be true modelers of human behavior, but we can find those drivers, those things that we think we can sort of use to describe what happens when aggregate behavior is carried out. And so what is this complexity theory? Who are the agents? How do they behave? Simply, we let it run and see what happens. It will create the pattern that we see. And what happens in most of these cases is you get a hierarchy in a system, which is not the same as top-down planning. I mean, the initial impulses say that's bad. No, these are natural hierarchies. Town Center Mall is bigger and better and worse than Point Beach Mall. It's a big place. It's natural. And we need to sort of keep thinking about systems, and I think I'm trying to sort of keep it simple. There are three: natural environment, socioeconomic system, and the governance system. So planning in this view is really an intervention into systems. Different from what planners have done in the past. Planners have sort of focused on land use. The argument here is that we need to sort of focus on the economic system. We need to sort of plan economics. We need to plan environments, not necessarily categories of land use which come out of some piece of legislation. So the other question is, at what scale, what level of resolution do we really attack these problems? And there are lots of different scales. And there's lots of different subjects, including the proverbial other. If we were going to sort of start to look at, say, environmental justice, where do we start? How is our conception of what environmental justice means dictated by the scale at which we choose to analyze it? And one of the things that we've sort of discovered is that at whatever scale we think we need to start at, we probably need to bracket it one scale up and one scale down to sort of get the constraints and perhaps the sub-drivers of this that's happening. So, the key idea is a bunch of questions. What is the scale at which these drivers are visible? Very simple example. I go shopping, you go shopping. It's an individual decision. When we all go shopping, we get Town Center Mall, or the Galleria, or Plantation, or Sawgrass Mills. How do we do that? At what level? What's the starting point of the analysis? And what are the appropriate responses once we know the starting point of analysis? How do we design things for the driver at the scale at which it's operating. And then some concepts of this sort of complexity theory, this notion of interdependency, the appropriate size, multi-scalar linkages, and governance matrix. And I'll run through those quickly. The notion of interdependency means that all municipalities, let's start with the municipalities, cannot be self-sufficient. The notion of having a municipal plan that pretends to be comprehensive is probably not very realistic in an environment where most of us leave to do most of our business. And that there is a whole, that is our life space, our metropolitan action space, which is in fact more than the sum of its parts. We just need to be dealing with this notion of interdependence. Size matters. One of the things about hierarchy theory tells us that there are some very large places and there's lots of very small places. And what we really need to do in creating a proposal is to figure out where we are on this hierarchy of this system. So what is the appropriate size of a element in a place in this sort of socioeconomic system? And the key is to sort of capture the size, the economic size, which allows us to internalize economies of scale. If we don't do that, then the project fails, either this year or next year. And I'll have some examples. This slide sort of says, this is years. And one year is a regional portrayal, all of South Florida. The middle gear is, let's say, Fort Lauderdale. The small gear is Rio Vista. What happens in communities is really at the smaller scale. And notice that that gear can be moving very quickly, and it will have no effect on the region. Okay? Or an urban phenomenon really has to move a lot to move that regional gear to some other form. Right? So this is not to say that we should not do local stuff. In fact, we should do local stuff. But the notion of the impact or the scale of its response needs to be understood. And that's all. It just needs to be understood. The last thing is this notion of governance. So I sort of started this talk, this section, with that the scale of our political systems is wrong. And so the simple solution is to go back to the 60s or the 70s and sort of go back to these experiments in governance, metropolitan, some notion of democracy, and all of these other things, consolidation. And I don't think that's what I'm talking about. I think what I'm talking about is the need for some purposeful guidance by some self-organized ether, which is organized somehow to guide the region. Now that's very fuzzy. But I'm not prepared to say we need, a combined agency of any sort. But there is this notion that the regions of these activities are in fact governed as if by Adam Smith's invisible hand. The question is, how can we create the invisible hand? How can we, in an arena where lots of people have authority, somehow or another nurture that invisible hand to think region? Not an easy job. So, I think the thing with this sort of this multi-scalar system stuff is really plan for people, not places. That's a starting point. Plan processes, not places. And plan governance. So the difference between planning processes and places is, of course, that the place approach is what we have. We have a planning system that emphasizes place. Comprehensive plan